And welcome back to Mid Mornings on Main, and welcome to Congressman Andy Barr, who's with us this morning. We're so glad that he's here and able to be back in the studio, which hadn't happened in a while, even though we've been able to visit by phone a little bit. And Congressman, good to have you here.
Good morning, Dan. It's great to be back with you in person on the air, and what a beautiful day in Montgomery County.
Yeah. Well, Congressman, we were just commenting earlier. If you look up on the buildings on the top there and realize those buildings were built, over 100 years ago, and you look at the cornices and the stonework on the windows, and sometimes we miss, what makes a community appealing. That's just one of the things. The architecture in this community is really appealing.
Really is. And this is the epitome of Main Street USA, small town America. It's just a nice and refreshing break, frankly, from Washington, D.C. It's I enjoy being here in central Kentucky much more than I do in Washington. I feel very grateful for the opportunity to get to go to Washington and fight for the families of central Kentucky in Congress, but I'd rather be here, frankly. This is home to me, and I like being around the people here.
Yeah, we planned the studio just for people like you when you would come in. So right here on Main Street, the flag flying and the city park and the bell. That's actually the Liberty, but no, that's kind of a replica of. But it is something. You sit here and you look up, and there's the historical marker on the courthouse lawn, and it's just kind of.
It is. It's idyllic.
It is idyllic.
And I do brag to my colleagues from around the country about our congressional district. People don't know, people have never been to central Kentucky. They don't know our people. They don't know our values, our culture, our heritage. And so I feel like in some ways my job is to educate some of my colleagues from different parts of the country, especially in the urban areas, what my district is all about. They don't understand us. And so I try to tell them about places like Mount Sterling and what, how patriotic people are here, how much they care about family, how much they care about going to church and working hard and, putting food on the table, their struggles, their aspirations. And I just feel very, very blessed to represent the people here.
I was working in far eastern Kentucky one time, and I had an assistant, and she had to go to a much larger city for training, and she's down in Pike County, and when she came back, I knew what the answer was going to be. When I said, well, how did you like being in that city, and she said, Dan, the people just aren't very sophisticated up there. And I'm thinking, can we bottle this? Because just the opposite would be. Those people would think, those poor people down in eastern Kentucky and central Kentucky, that there are a lot of misconceptions, a lot of stereotypes that need to be broken down. And, hey, you do that for us all the time in Congress.
Well, that's what we try to do, that and break down those stereotypes and explain what it is that we believe in, and we fight for those values in Congress.
Yeah. I thought we would start this morning talking about something that is very crucial, not in Mount Sterling, but in a lot of the areas, not only in your particular district, but all over the country, and that's the banking issue. Because we've had a lot of smaller banks that have gone out. It's very important. My biggest criticism of Congress in general is just a lack of forward thinking. Too many times we're always trying to put our finger in the hole in the dike rather than thinking ahead before that happens. And I know you've been working on issues trying to see if we can shore up banks in smaller communities which really need them, and it's really important.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you talk about our district as opposed to other districts around the country, we have unique needs and challenges. And one of the things that I've noticed over the course of my service, especially on the Financial Services Committee, is that rural America, we are losing a lot of bank branches. And, banks are the lifeblood of the economy of local communities. Also credit unions and farm credit. There's a lot of farmers here that rely on the farm credit system. But these community financial institutions are what people rely on to finance their farms, to finance their small businesses, the beauty parlor, the barber shop, the corner restaurant, and the farm supply store, and to get a mortgage, to buy a home, and even a loan to purchase a vehicle, a truck. And so what I see is a disturbing trend of consolidation in banking, where big banks, Wall Street banks and big regional banks in big cities around the country, they're buying up these small town community banks. Here in Mount Sterling, we're blessed to have a hometown bank, traditional bank. We've got People's Exchange Bank. We've got Whitaker Bank. I don't want to leave anyone out, but we've got
Community Trust.
Community Trust Bank. Exactly. There you go. That's a good Pikeville bank. Speaking of Pikeville. Yeah. But these are small town, hometown community financial institutions that know their customers. The teller, the loan officer, because they go to church with you. Your kids go to school with their kids. And there's something about that other banks don't have. The big Wall Street banks, it's very impersonal. We have to, and this is very unique, by the way. If you go to Europe, if you go to Asia, they don't have community banks. They don't have that. They just have huge monstrosity banks. And I think what makes and sets apart our economy, and one of the reasons why we have a competitive edge in the United States, is that in rural America, we've got these small town community banks where you can get credit, you can get a line of credit, you can get a loan, you can get a mortgage, you can build a farm based on your character, in addition to, the fact that you've got a lot of cash somewhere. And I think that is really what has driven our economy forward over the years, is that people develop a personal relationship, and it's based on trust and based on, the character of the borrower, that they're going to be able to pay that back. Or at least they're going to work really hard. And by the way, that lender, that banker is going to be able to work with that borrower if there's a tough time. And that really, I think, has driven our local economies forward over the years. Well, what we've seen over the last probably a decade plus is a consolidation in banking, where these small town community banks are going out of business, or they're being bought by larger institutions, and we're seeing a decline in the number of branches in rural areas. And the statistics back that up. So what I've decided to do is introduce a bill called Promoting Access to Capital in Underserved Communities Act. I originally introduced the bill in the last Congress, and it would require the federal banking agencies to issue rules to allow more so-called de novo charters, or new banks to form, and give them a little bit of a runway to meet some of the regulatory requirements, the so-called capital requirements, and also allow these new banks greater flexibility to modify their business plans to account for changing market conditions, and avoid some of the cumbersome pre-approval process for changes, and also incentivize new bank formation in underserved rural communities by providing a variety of regulatory relief, including, importantly for a community like Montgomery County, eliminating the agriculture loan concentration limits. These bank regulators who are in Washington, they don't really understand our local economy. And they say, well, you've got too many agriculture loans on your books, and you can't do that. Well, that's the central economic driver of places like Montgomery County, is agriculture. And if you can't ask a lender to not have, agriculture concentration, because that's really a central feature of our local economy. So I'm trying to eliminate those bureaucratic, red tape that is basically a barrier for a lot of these small hometown banks. And I think preserving that, relationship banking, where it's face to face, it's personal, it's based on trust because you know the person. I think if we lose that, we lose kind of a central feature of our local culture and our economy.
If that bill can be passed, What's it going to cost the taxpayer to implement that?
Oh, nothing. Nothing. In fact, it would probably generate revenue for the government because it would create more taxpayers. It would create economic growth. It would help job creation because it would increase access to credit in rural, underserved communities like, Montgomery County or Menifee County or Powell County. And that's what we want. That's what we need. We need a more vibrant economy to bring more jobs to these communities.
Let's talk a little bit about accountability. My audience has heard me say this a couple of other times. There's a song called "The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia." You remember that one?
Yes.
Hey, and there's a line in there where the pot-bellied sheriff, pronounced the guy guilty and said, "Supper's waiting. We got to get to it." And his work was done, and the guy was innocent, but he didn't care. He needed to get to dinner. I sometimes say that I feel like too many people in Washington, what happens in Congress way too often is a problem comes up, a bill is presented, it awards billions of dollars. I don't want to say trillions now, even though that seems to be a more popular word. Billions of dollars to throw at a problem, and then everybody says, "Okay, let's go to dinner." And then after the fact, I worry about accountability of those dollars.
I do too. And Dan, I know the taxpayers, the hardworking taxpayers of Montgomery County get sick to their stomachs hearing, they have to send all this money to Washington, and they hear this money just being flushed down the drain. We spent 20 years in Afghanistan, trillions of dollars of Americans' taxpayer investment. We spent money on mapping the entire geology of the country of Afghanistan. We built, the American taxpayer built infrastructure to what would be rare earth mineral mines that could be used to help the Afghan people, that could be used to help decrease our dependence in the United States on foreign sources of rare earth elements. And now we have retreated from Afghanistan on an unconditional basis. And we hear reports this morning that the Chinese Communist Party is now in communication with the Taliban to take over those mines. So here it is. The American taxpayer over 20 years finances the geological survey of Afghanistan. The taxpayer pays for the infrastructure and the roads for these mines. And now the Chinese are going to exploit these minerals and create a national security challenge for the United States. It's just so disgusting. And I think the American people are so upset when they hear things like this. And then, COVID, there was so much money that was borrowed to respond to COVID. Of course, some of it was appropriate. We were in an economic and public health crisis. I voted for several bipartisan bills that responded to the crisis. I was proud to do so. But after borrowing and spending all of that money, then we come, last February, and in a very partisan political bill that was passed, $2 trillion in additional borrowing when there was still a $1 trillion. I'm sorry. Yeah. Gosh, so much money. $1 trillion still had not yet been deployed from the previous bill. So think about that. They borrow and spend, the majority in the Congress and the new President Biden's bill. They borrowed an additional $2 trillion, and $1 trillion of the previous bills had not yet even been spent. I just don't think that hardworking taxpayers, regardless of your political party, thinks that's responsible.
When we talk about the 1.2 trillion or whatever for the infrastructure bill, what happens to that 1.2 trillion dollars while it's waiting to be spent? I mean, it's that's an accountant's question, but you are an attorney, so that's close enough. What happens to that money while we're waiting?
Well, again, I worry about waste. I worry about fraud and abuse in these programs, and we need infrastructure. We definitely do, but we need it to be paid for. And you've got two bills pending in the Congress right now. One is the so-called bipartisan infrastructure bill. It's certainly better than the other one. The other one is really what I call a socialism bill. It's all borrowed. It's Green New Deal. It's amnesty for illegal immigrants. It is, total amnesty for every illegal immigrant in the country is included in that bill. A magnet for more illegal immigration, and we have a huge crisis on our southern border right now. But it would also create these unsustainable new entitlements, runaway spending, adding another 3.5, but I think actually the real score, according to some think tanks, is around $5 trillion. And it would set these programs on autopilot. It would dramatically expand the entitlement state, the welfare state, pay people to not work, discourage work. That's the last thing we need right now when we have a huge labor shortage in this country. And we have an inflation crisis, basically a tax on all middle-income, hardworking Montgomery Countyans. They're seeing the price of lumber go up. They're seeing the price of steel go up, food, groceries, the cost of milk, the cost of gas. Gas is, you just go to the gas station and just to fill up your truck costs a heck of a lot more money these days. The last thing we need is more fuel on that fire. We can't afford the cost of living these days. And all of this overspending is hurting middle-class Americans.
Our guest this morning, Congressman Andy Barr, here on Mid Mornings on Maine. We're glad that he is with us. Does it feel strange at all to be out of Washington at a point in time when there are so many things going on? And I wonder about the communication link that you have in terms of being able to really feel totally informed of everything that's going on when you're away from Washington.
But I think it's so important to get out in the community like we're doing today. When I'm home in Kentucky, I want to get out and visit with our constituents, and it's important to listen because I can't represent this district if I don't actually come and visit with the people like I'm doing today. And it's very valuable to me because I can go back to Washington and, when I'm debating my colleagues about this $3.5 trillion spending, I actually can share the perspectives of my constituents and their concerns about putting mountains of debt on our future generations. I can talk about the frustration of the Afghanistan veteran who is so upset about this retreat from Afghanistan. I can talk to them about, in this bipartisan infrastructure bill, why is it there more equity for rural America? Why is there so much focus on spending infrastructure on mass transit and concentrating most of the roads and bridges in the urban areas? What about Mount Sterling? What about Montgomery County? What about Menifee County? What about Powell County and Estill County? Why isn't there more rural broadband? Why aren't we getting more of the resources to the underserved rural populations of this country? Why are we giving Pete Buttigieg, the transportation secretary, all of the discretion on where the money goes? I want a bipartisan infrastructure bill. We need it. We need more roads. We need more bridges. But I just don't trust the process that if we borrow all this money, is it actually going to help my constituents? And I'm going to challenge, I think playing hardball on behalf of the people of Montgomery County is important. I want to know, and I want assurances from the politicians and the bureaucrats in Washington that this money, number one, that we're going to pay for it so we don't put more debt on our kids and grandkids, but also, is it actually going to help my constituents in rural Kentucky?
Yeah. The Mayor de Blasio of New York, I heard him making comments about the infrastructure and the need, and of course, going through the storms that they have had and the flooding and everything, but he was talking about the need of the federal government to step in and provide billions of dollars so that the subway system can be upgraded and that they can work on roads and things like that. And when I hear that, I think that I sense, the federal government has to play a part, but then you wonder, in the most dynamic city in America, New York City, with everything going on there, would the tax base, if used properly, not cover a lot of those things that he is talking about? Where has that money gone? Is it, and I may be completely wrong, they may have been using every penny.
Well, when I listen to my constituents in Mount Sterling, Montgomery County, Camargo, wherever I am around here, and we talk about infrastructure, they're asking me, well, why are we sending billions of dollars to upgrade the subways in New York and billions of dollars to subsidize Amtrak, which doesn't have a business plan that's profitable? Or why are we spending billions of dollars on upgrading or even tearing down infrastructure in big cities? And actually, that's what's crazy is this bill actually spends money to tear down infrastructure that liberals in big cities think is not needed. Or why are the taxpayers of Montgomery County, Kentucky, sending their hard-earned tax dollars to Washington to subsidize electric vehicle charging stations? See, this is the disconnect between small town America, Main Street USA, and the politicians in Washington. And they don't understand why I oppose. Oh, aren't you for the environment? Aren't you concerned about climate change? And what I tell them is, look, my farmers in Montgomery County, the people of Montgomery County who are going to work every day in their truck, they just see that the gas is going through the roof. And the liberals in Washington say, yeah, that's what we want. We want the people in your part of the country to pay more because we don't want them to be driving that truck. We need more bicycles. I said, come to Montgomery County. We can't get to work on a bicycle. They just have no concept. They don't understand how people live in our part of the world. And so I have to oppose bills that have these unrealistic proposals in there. And I think that we need some changes in Washington so that we have a little bit more common sense.
Let's talk about, I don't know where to go next. We want to cover everything we can. But do you get a sense that how isolated are we from things happening down on the border in terms of the people that are coming across illegally being here and the potential problems that might incur? I think this in this community, we have a migrant population. And I don't know, but when I see those people that have come from elsewhere into this community, they're working on our farms to a large extent, and for the most part here, they seem pretty happy. They seem, somewhat well taken care of. I don't think that people are looking down on them, that they're, for the most part, kind of glad to have those people here doing some of those work.
We welcome legal migrant workers to provide the labor for our farms. That's not the issue. The issue is that we have no operational control over the southern border of the United States. Since President Biden took office, he reversed the policies of President Trump, and now we have a totally open border. This is a national security crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis. It's a public health crisis. It's a national security crisis because we're on pace to have over 2 million undocumented illegal migrants cross our southern border this year alone since President Biden has taken office. That's a record. It's a problem because they're coming from countries where the Delta variant of COVID and the Lambda variant are on fire. Because of this president's catch and release program and policy, the reversal of the Trump administration policy of remain in Mexico, we've seen in the first 7 months of this administration, literally hundreds of thousands of people from these hotspots, these COVID hotspots, come across the border, not tested, not vaccinated, and released into the interior of our country. And for an administration that says that it's so serious about, preventing the spread of COVID-19, to allow these individuals to be released into the interior of our country with no vaccine, no testing, no public health screenings. It's outrageous, and the hypocrisy. I think people see that. We know that from Customs and Border Protection, from the Department of Homeland Security, that We've had at least 4 individuals who were apprehended at the southern border over the last several months were on the terror watch list. In the month of July, we had 212 illegal migrants apprehended at the southern border. That's a 13% increase over June, a 420% increase over last July, and a 353% increase from the average number of apprehensions during the Trump administration. This is a dramatic shift in policy away from border security to an open border situation. And here's what's really scary. Now that we had this huge jailbreak of hardened terrorists, of suicidal jihadists from the detention centers all over Afghanistan, Afghanistan is now once again a pre-9/11 style incubator for terrorism. And we have no security on our southern border. And what I'm very, very concerned about is the fact that the Customs and Border Protection and the Department of Homeland Security are reporting to Congress that in the month of June, we had 180,000 illegal migrants apprehended at the southern border. 40,000 of those individuals who were apprehended, not including the getaways, not including the people who we didn't catch, but 40,000 people in 1 month were not from Mexico, Central America, or South America. They were from places like the Middle East. They were from places like Asia and Africa. We don't know who these people are. And we've got a terrible drug crisis in this country. Fentanyl is way up. We had more fentanyl seized at the southern border in the first 4 months of the Biden administration than we've had in years. And in fact, probably in history, because what they tell us is that the amount of fentanyl that was actually seized at the southern border the first 4 months of the Biden administration was enough to kill every man, woman, and child in America 4 times over. So, when we're trying to combat the opioid crisis, when we're trying to deal with the drug crisis in our communities, the last thing we need is all of this fentanyl pouring across our southern border. This is a humanitarian crisis. It's a public health crisis because we have all this COVID coming into our border, untested, unvaccinated. And we have a national security crisis because we have all these terrorists now on the loose because of the collapse of Afghanistan. And I just don't think this administration is taking this seriously at all. It's a tragedy.
Congressman Andy Barr, our guest this morning. I'd like to see you do I think Paul Harvey would not be upset at all if you did a thing regularly called The Rest of the Story. And by the way, hey, look at our kids coming down the street in masks over there.
There they are.
They are masked up.
Well, I hope the kids are back in school. That's the thing that.
Yeah, we're out for 2 days here in Montgomery County, and but I was gonna ask you about Paul Harvey did the thing called The Rest of the Story.
Oh yeah, I remember.
And there's a real need. One of the things, and I don't know if it ever gets talked about in Congress, but to build an electric car, you got to have lithium. And you got to have quite a bit of lithium to build an electric car. And guess what? We don't have any lithium, do we?
No. And in fact, guess who has the monopoly on lithium? It's China. The people in Washington, everything just lacks common sense. They want this new green economy, this sustainable economy, a climate friendly economy. But they don't want to get tough on China, and they don't want supply chain resiliency. I'm for batteries. I'm for improving our energy and our energy storage. But in order to do that, we have to have a domestic supply of lithium. And so, a lot of this has to do with, making things in America again. The COVID taught us a lot about the vulnerabilities of the United States and our supply chains. We have a shortage. If you go out to Dutch's and you want to buy a truck, you're going to see inventory that's probably down. I haven't talked to the folks out at Dutch's, but every car dealership and truck dealership in central Kentucky is having a shortage of inventory. The reason is that the manufacturers can't get the semiconductor chips to go into their cars. And part of that has to do with the fact that we are over dependent on a foreign supply of semiconductor chips. 60% of all semiconductor microchips that go into our iPads and our iPhones and our cars, our vehicles, any electric devices comes from Taiwan. Well, as a result of the collapse of Afghanistan, the Chinese Communist Party has said President Biden is weak. We know he won't respond. We are now going to threaten Taiwan. And in fact, they sent 2 open letters to the Taiwanese people telling them that the Americans are in retreat. They do not protect their friends. They do not defend their friends. And so you need to now reunite with the motherland, the Communist Party in Beijing, and you need to come back and be part of China, just like what they did with taking over Hong Kong a few years ago. And if that happens, then we lose 60% of the supply of semiconductor chips. We already have a shortage right now. We saw what after the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the virus that escaped the pandemic and their cover up, the Chinese communists covered up the pandemic and enabled that to spread. And what did they do after that? They weaponized the supply chain against the United States. A top Chinese official said soon into the pandemic, we are going to throw Americans into a sea of coronavirus. And then they hoarded all of the medical equipment, all of the gloves and the masks and the gowns that they manufacture and that we depended on, and we had a huge shortage. They have weaponized these supply chains against us, and this is a wake-up call for the American people. We need to make more things in America. We need the jobs to stay in America, and we need to decrease our dependence on China and other foreign sources.
Let's talk about our business a little bit, the communications area, and what you're seeing happening out there. And again, as a part of the Foreign Relations Committee, the information that crosses your desk, additionally, not maybe that you didn't have access to a lot of it anyway, but I'm sure it's gone way up as a part of that particular group. But I wonder how many times you see things, and there are 2 parts. One part is it's out there for anybody to see. The news media could get a hold of it if they wanted to very easily. And then there are some things that I'm sure are much more kept under the table. But when you watch the news, when you see the news, what do you think about the information that the American public is being given? And how many times do you say
it's a head scratcher? Yeah. It's a head scratcher. I mean, I'm sometimes in the middle of the news, and I see the nightly news and how it's reported, and I'm like, that's not at all what happened at all. I mean, that's not at all what went on in that meeting, for example. And you talk about Paul Harvey and the rest of the story. The American people deserve the rest of the story, and they often do not get it from the mainstream media. And so I think it's important for people to be skeptical and to find out on their own. And don't believe everything on the internet. Don't believe everything you hear on TV. Don't believe everything you see on TV. Don't believe everything you read in the newspaper. Scrutinize and get your information from multiple different sources and make judgments on your own. Try to be as informed as you can. But, it's shocking to me, for example, that we have a commander-in-chief who is trying to sell and spin to the American people that this with this so-called withdrawal, which I would call an unconditional retreat, and the collapse of Afghanistan, which has made our country so much less safe, that he's describing it as a success. Dan, I mean, I think most Americans are looking at this, especially veterans of Afghanistan, Gold Star families who lost loved ones. They're seeing this as a slap in the face. They're seeing this as the most embarrassing, humiliating, disastrous foreign policy failure of their lifetimes. And for good reason, because when this president took over the White House just 7 months ago, we had only 2,500 boots on the ground. We had leveraged that to about 7,700 NATO coalition forces, many more non-American boots on the ground, and that was sustaining and supporting hundreds of thousands of Afghan National Army National Security Forces that were actually doing the fighting. If you actually look at the numbers, we lost over 2,000 Americans over the course of 20 years fighting, killed in action, fighting in Afghanistan, the longest war. And in the last 5 years, we lost 52, not including the 13 killed in action at the Hamid Karzai International Airport just 2 weeks ago. So you're talking about, tragic as they are, not nearly as many lost lives as we were seeing, say, 6, 7, 8 years ago in Afghanistan. A much smaller footprint, much more affordable in terms of the number of troops that we had there and the cost of being there. We had less boots on the ground. Think about this, Dan. In January, when Joe Biden took the presidency, we had less troops on the ground in Afghanistan than we had in Spain. We have had over 20,000 U.S. troops in South Korea, Japan, and Germany for the last 75 years, and we only had 2,500 U.S. forces on the ground. And if the strategic vision of the Biden administration is, no, we're going to exit Afghanistan and we're going to pivot to China, I actually understand that. China is the existential threat. But why on earth would you abandon Bagram Air Base, the most secure and fortified U.S. air base in that region, and in the only country with a physical border with the People's Republic of China? We just gave it up. When Joe Biden's national security team announced in April of last year that they were going to shift the policy away from the Trump policy of a conditional drawdown, conditions-based drawdown, not an unconditional surrender, but a condition-based drawdown, and instead move toward this policy of an unconditional surrender, a complete withdrawal with no conditions, a retreat, basically. When they announced that, I asked the question to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, General Milley, Secretary Austin, the Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, and the Secretary of State, Blinken. I said, what are you going to do about Bagram? What does this plan mean for the Bagram Air Base? Because I've been there. I've seen it. I've seen the forward force projection and the counterterrorism operations operating out of there, the deterrence that facility has on China. And they said to me that their orders were total withdrawal. They were going to abandon Bagram. Well, little did I know in April that when they said that, they were going to actually vacate Bagram before we got our people out, before we got our equipment out. And now we have $85 billion of U.S. taxpayer-funded Humvees, Black Hawk helicopters, trucks, ammunition, weapons in the hands of our enemy, the Taliban and ISIS-K and the Haqqani network and Al-Qaeda. We've just turned it all over to them because we didn't hold on to Bagram. We didn't have an orderly exit, orderly drawdown. And we've left hundreds, if not thousands of Americans stranded behind enemy lines. On August 15th, Dan, when President Biden announced in horror to the country that the Taliban had taken over Kabul and had totally taken over that country because of the hasty retreat and the unplanned disorganized retreat, he also, and his government, his administration announced that there was about, they estimated, 10 to 15,000 Americans still in Afghanistan. Secretary Blinken, in a call with me and several other members of Congress 2 days ago, told us that as of August 31st, they had evacuated 5,500 Americans, and there were only 200 Americans who had been left behind who actually wanted to leave. So, number one, they're admitting that they abandoned about 200 Americans that want to get out of the country, as bad as that is. But they also are saying that the remaining thousands of Americans that they stranded in a Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS overrun country don't want to leave. Now, does that really register with any American? Does any American believe the lies of this administration that Americans stranded in Afghanistan want to stay in a place where these barbarians crucify Christians, they burn people alive, they decapitate them? These are barbarians, and they're the same people who prosecuted the attacks on 9/11 20 years ago. Let me just say this. Look, I don't want endless wars. No one wants nation building. There was a bipartisan agreement about this. President Trump said this, and this is what President Biden says. But I regret to inform my constituents, but I have access to intelligence. I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I see this. And the truth is, Joe Biden might say he's done with Afghanistan, but Afghanistan is not done with Joe Biden. And now we have the largest jailbreak of hardened terrorists, people, enemy combatants that our brave men and women in uniform captured over the course of the last 20 years, detained them, kept them off the battlefield, and now they're loose. They have, because of Joe Biden's incompetence, Because of this president and this administration's incompetence, we now have thousands of suicidal jihadists on the loose. And believe you me, Afghanistan is once again, just like it was on September 10th, 2001, a breeding ground, a haven, an incubator for terrorism, and a place where these terrorists can launch attacks against our homeland, against our allies, against the United States. It's a very dangerous situation, and we don't have control over our southern border. I mean, this is just outrageous, and we need to take steps to reverse course. We're pushing the administration to give us answers and to give us a plan how to get our people out. It's just a sad, sad day for our country.
What would it have taken, in your estimation, to have essentially obliterated the Taliban? How costly would it have been? Was it possible to do that? How much danger to innocent civilians would there have been for us to have gone in and said, listen, this is a war. These people have indicated in every way that they would like to destroy America. We need to take them out. Rather than seemingly going in, it seems as if we went into Afghanistan, I don't know, playing nice is not the right word, but not with a strong enough mission in mind, maybe?
Well, look, I mean, I don't think anybody believes that a nation building project and an endless war is a good idea. We need most of our troops back home. But what we were doing, and successfully, especially over the last 5 years, in coordination with a multilateral NATO coalition force and hundreds of thousands of Afghans who needed our help. You know, President Biden blames everyone. He blames Trump. He blames his own military. He blames the American people for not getting out sooner. He blames the Afghans for not fighting. The Afghan National Army did quite well. They were the ones taking all the casualties over the last 6 years, but they needed our maintenance. They needed our contractors. They needed our air cover. We were providing the air cover for the ground troops in the Afghan National Army that were actually doing a good job, not totally obliterating the Taliban, but keeping them at bay and deterring the Taliban. And that was the mission, and the mission was being carried out quite successfully. But if I could, Dan, I know that this is such a patriotic community. We've got you've got this wonderful American Legion post here in Mount Sterling. You've got amazing veterans in this community who are heartbroken about and angry. And you have Gold Star families all over Kentucky and all over this country who are sick about, they're losing their loved ones, and the way this unconditional retreat has unfolded in the collapse of Afghanistan. I have a message for them that this was not your fault, that your service was valuable, that your sacrifice, if you know a Gold Star family, if you lost a limb in Afghanistan, if you suffered the invisible wounds of war, if you're struggling with post-traumatic stress, my message to you as a veteran is your service was worth it. Don't let anyone tell you that this was not worth it, that your service was a waste. Don't let anyone tell you that. It's not true. You kept our country safe for 20 years. You prevented another 9/11 attack on our homeland for the last 20 years. You kept America safe for the last 20 years. And what unfolded over the last several months is not your fault. The fault lies with one group of politicians in Washington who didn't listen to the military experts, who didn't listen to and didn't honor the service of these great American patriots who kept our country safe over the last 20 years. So look, we don't want endless wars, but if anyone thinks that because of the presidency of Joe Biden, we've ended this war, they're sorely mistaken. This war is not over because the Taliban, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Haqqani network, they're not ending this war with us. And you may not like it, but we have to defend ourselves, and we have to protect our homeland, and we have to protect our people. We have to secure our border. And yes, we have to have a minimal presence overseas in coordination with other allies to deter and prevent attacks over here.
From a common sense standpoint, Does it ever, in your opinion, make any sense to spend hundreds of billions of dollars to build an air base in a location and then to walk away from it, even realizing that it does cost to continue that air base on a regular basis, but we built it for a reason. We built it in a location for a reason. So does it ever make sense to walk away from it?
It is absolutely infuriating. And that's why I asked the Biden administration's national security team, what in the world were they thinking to abandon? I get, reducing our force presence there. And I know the American people are war weary. They don't want an endless war. They don't want nation building. But the fact of the matter is, there are threats to the United States, the West, and our allies. And whether it's the Al Udeid Air Base that I visited in Qatar a few weeks ago, it's a peninsula on the Arabian Peninsula that juts into the Persian Gulf. They call it the Arabian Gulf, but it's just for our F-35s about a 10-minute flight to Iranian airspace. It is a deterrent to our enemies. And it's an impressive facility. There's 8,000 U.S. airmen stationed over there at the Al Udeid Air Base. But Bagram Air Base was a deterrent not only to the terrorists and provided the air cover that the Afghan National Army on the ground needed to deter the Taliban and to hold the Taliban in check, but it also is a deterrent to China. It's on the back door of the Chinese Communist Party. And we've given that up. We've totally given that up. And you know who's going to take over that U.S. taxpayer-funded airbase? The Chinese. This is a disaster for our national security. And so I just, I warned them. And I even, in May, we had Zalmay Khalilzad, who is the U.S. ambassador for Afghan reconciliation, in front of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And I asked him, I said, when you lose Bagram and when we see a surge in terrorism, and when we see another attack on our homeland, and we see China moving in coordination with the Taliban to take over our own facility at Bagram, what are your plans to take back Bagram? Do you have the capability of taking back the Bagram Air Base? And of course, the ambassador just demurred and said, well, you need to ask the Department of Defense that question. This administration's not thinking strategically at all. And they're not realistic about the threats that are actually out there.
Congressman, our time is way too quickly gone. How much longer are you in this area, and then when will things kick off again in Washington? Very quickly, if you could kind of tell us what do you see being the items on the agenda that we might look forward to?
I think number one is getting our people out of Afghanistan, and I've co-sponsored a bill that would require the administration to give us a plan in the Congress and the American people. What's your plan to get every single American who's trapped behind enemy lines, who President Biden abandoned behind enemy lines? What's your plan to get them out now that you've totally evacuated without a plan by giving up Bagram before we got our people and our equipment out? What's the plan to go get them behind enemy lines? I've got a call with a Democratic colleague right now. What is the plan today? Because we share a constituent who is trapped behind enemy lines. This is someone who lived in Georgetown, Kentucky, and he's now in Virginia. And I'm going to ask this Democrat colleague of mine to talk to his friends at the White House to figure out what are we supposed to tell them? We're communicating with these people behind enemy lines, and they say, oh, we're going to get them out. Well, what's the plan? I think we need to be back in Washington as soon as possible to demand answers from this administration, what the plan is going to be. And then the bill that I've co-sponsored also would prevent this administration from recognizing the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan, and make sure that no taxpayer money is ever delivered or sent to the Taliban. And so what I'm worried about, Dan, is that what we have in the makings right now is the single largest hostage crisis in American history. You've got Americans stranded behind enemy lines. The Taliban, they're going to threaten to decapitate our people on television or burn them alive in cages if we don't pay them money. And there's only one person who is responsible for this, and that's the president. The president is responsible for this hasty retreat, this unplanned retreat, and abandoning our people behind enemy lines, our allies behind enemy lines, and now they have to be accountable for this. So I think, and I'm demanding that we go back and deal with this issue. Nancy Pelosi will not call us back because she doesn't want the political blowback. She wants to hide this issue. She wants to brush it under the rug and act like nothing to see here. But this is a calamity, and it's a crisis of the president's own making. We need to leave no man, no woman behind. That is an ethos of the United States military. We have journalists that are trapped over there. We have interpreters and people who helped us that are trapped over there. There was an interpreter who helped President Biden when he was a senator escape the mountains of Afghanistan, and he's begging this president to help him and his family because they are now targets of the Taliban. The incompetence is unbelievable. It just goes on and on and on. The Biden administration gave the Taliban, they're acting like they're our friends. They gave the Taliban a list of all of the Americans and the Afghans who are our friends, because we were relying on the Taliban to get these people to the airport. And now guess what? We pulled up our stakes and we're out of there, and they have the list. They have the list of the people that are our friends and our people, and now they're hunting them down to murder them. I am aghast at the incompetence and the malfeasance of these people, that they would actually give them the names of our people and our allies now to go butcher. So, I apologize for the outrage, but I think a lot of my constituents are equally outraged. And again, to the veterans of Afghanistan, this is not on you. This is not your fault. This is the fault of the current commander-in-chief. You did your job well, to perfection, over the last 20 years. You kept our country safe. You kept the terrorists at bay. You captured the terrorists. You put them in prison. And because of the incompetence of this administration, now they've all been released in the largest jailbreak of terrorists in our lifetime. So it's just to see all of the progress in the war on terror over the last 20 years totally erased by one incompetent president is just outrageous.
It's sad that we have too many problems to even scratch the surface in an hour, Congressman.
Yeah.
We're leaving. There are a lot of things on the table. I hope when you come back again, and I hope it's soon, I hope we can start off and there can be some positive things.
Well,
that we can talk about.
There are, and I'm sorry that we have to dwell on such a difficult subject, but it's on the hearts and minds of the American people. What's happened in Afghanistan? Nobody wants an endless war, but nobody also, wants to see what we've done in this retreat. It's this catastrophe. So you ask, what do we need to be focused on in Washington? We need to be going back and focusing on getting our people out. That's what we need to be focused on, and leaving no American behind enemy lines. Nancy Pelosi just wants to ignore that. She doesn't want us back for that. She wants us back for one reason alone, and that is to raise taxes on the American people, to force the citizens of Montgomery County to pay for electric vehicle charging stations in San Francisco, and to borrow more money to raise taxes on the hardworking people here. I will have nothing to do with that. I'm going to vote against all of this madness, and I'm going to demand accountability from this administration to get our people out of Afghanistan who are trapped behind enemy lines, and secure our border, for goodness sakes. I mean, our homeland is in jeopardy.
Congressman Andy Barr, our guest today. Travel safe, and you have two little girls to think about.
I do.
They stay on your mind when all these things are happening. I
do. And let me just try to end on a positive note. Look, we live in a great country. We got a lot of problems. We got a lot of challenges, a lot of threats in the world right now. I know people are sick of what's happening in Afghanistan. I know people are so upset about it. I know people are upset about the high price of gas, the high price of groceries, the high cost of living, the fact that we've got a labor shortage. There's a lot of crises, the border crisis. I know. But I just want to say, look, let's remember this is the greatest country in the world. Think of those veterans. Think of what they've sacrificed for us, how lucky we are, how blessed we are to live in a country where people, our fellow Americans, have been willing to sacrifice, in some cases, the ultimate sacrifice for us, for our freedom. And, this country is such a great country. It's worth fighting for. It's worth fighting for. We are blessed. Let's fight together to save our country. It's worth fighting for.
Thanks, Congressman.
Thanks so much.